Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Encore Palm Beach County for our monthly Zoom call. Today, we have a special opportunities for you to hear from our founder, Rosemary Nixon, as she introduces and interviews our special guest, Steven Hurwitz. Rosemary, it's all yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm glad to see that you're with us here today. Stephen was recommended by Karen Roberts, who everybody knows, was actually the inspiration behind our Wisdom and Experience Works for Business Awards, which is scheduled for September 21st again this year. And if it weren't for Karen and all the work she did for the last few years on this, there wouldn't be an event. And I want to make sure that Karen gets a thank you for that. Well, a more public thank you than she's heard many from me, but couldn't have done it without her. And she recommended that we hear from Steven Hurwitz today. And Steven brings, I think, a different perspective on things as a seasoned human resource professional. He spent 30 years working with multiple industries, which I think is great. And I found very impressive. He has worked with the Harris Corporation, the Nabisco Biscuit Corporation, Starbucks Coffee, Seattle Children's Hospital, 98 Points Telehealth, and most recently, the Palm Beach County Healthcare District. A really broad range of industries, Stephen, and maybe we'll get into the why and what that diversity brought to you as an HR professional and your view of the potential of people to find work in various industries. And Stephen, and what's different about Stephen is he's semi-retired from his most recent position. And he is also unique in that he has a very strong, interest in volunteerism, helping other people and organizations. And the result of that, he has established his own consulting, coaching, and change management and leadership development practice called SGH Associates. So I think the first thing that we should talk about, Stephen, is why semi-retired? Why not full-time any longer? Why did you start your business? And, what's your biggest goal in starting that business?
So that's an excellent question and a great introduction. Thank you. And also very nice to meet everybody on this virtual session. So as Rosemary stated, I started my career 30 years ago, and I started it in Melbourne, Florida with Harris Corporation, which at that time was a very large DoD business. And I learned in my first 4 years there that what I went to school for and what my passions were related to human resources aren't always going to be able to be realized within the workforce. And so very early in my career, I had made the decision that I want to do as well as I can professionally for as long as I can. But my true goal was at some point in time when I'm still motivated and I still want to help people in doing the right thing, that I would step out of corporate America and I would do that through my own business. And so one of the things that I learned and in being a human resource executive is that you always want to do the right thing, and you always want to do the right thing for the employee, and you'll learn to balance doing the right thing for the employee with the right thing for the business. And depending on your CEO, depending on your executive team, sometimes that sways more to helping the employee. Sometimes that sways more to only helping the business. And what I want to do is help people on the people side, because that's where I feel like a lot of the decisions tend to fall more on the business side due to many different reasons. Sometimes it's politics, sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not necessary. But as part of SGH Associates, I want to help business leaders really understand that balance and make the decision that's best for the employee every opportunity they can.
Stephen, are you consulting, just to clarify, are you consulting with companies primarily, or are you working with individuals who are looking for work?
That's an excellent question. So I stepped out of corporate America at the end of December. And so I am about 100 days into my SGH Associates. Today, I am working with 4 corporations, 1 large, 3 small, and I'm also doing 3 clients on the coaching side. So I'm working with 3 individuals to help them. Each of them are struggling within their careers, and each of them are looking to figure out whether they stay within the organization they're in or whether they go and do something that's better for them and better fit for their skills and experiences.
To your knowledge, Stephen, is that a little bit different than what most people are doing? My observation after 6 years of working with Encore is that people tend to either be helping companies find workers or craft HR policies and so forth, or they tend to be on the career coaching side, not having been in HR. Do you think that what you're doing is a little different, bringing the HR perspective to not just to companies, but to individuals looking for work?
Absolutely. I feel like with my 30 years of experience across 5 different industries, reporting directly to 4 different CEOs, I've learned enough knowledge on both sides of the equation that I can really make a difference in both of them. So I do think that it's unique. I would say that, as you mentioned, I believe in the importance of volunteering. Right now, the 3 coaching sessions I'm doing are for individuals, and I'm doing it on a pro bono basis because they're individuals that I've known in the past who can really benefit from some very good coaching. And that is a way for me to give back to the community that I'm really proud of.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. It would be a shame not to have more of that kind of help for people. The people that you're working with, would you say that they were skilled, professional people who are having a problem finding work that is commensurate with their skills and their income needs?
The answer to that is yes, which is why I was so excited to take this opportunity to work with Encore PBC. 2 of them are still currently employed, but they feel that their skills are not valued any longer. They haven't seen progression in their career. They haven't seen financial progression within their career. And they're really trying to determine, do I just stick with it because I'm afraid to go out to the outside world? And the other individual is on the outside world, and they're looking to get back into, in their case, they're looking to get back into corporate America, and they're finding it to be very difficult.
One of the things that I've noticed in talking and meeting with people that, and it goes back to the recession or the debacle of 2008, the financial crash, a lot of people in their 50s lost good jobs for whatever reason, the industry problems and so forth, the downsizing and all. And those are the people there are people who want to make a few bucks in retirement with a part-time job. Yes, we'd like to help them, but have always been more concerned about those people who have lost good jobs in the prime of their life and can't find that way back in. A lot of things happening in the labor market, and I'm sure you know about all that. But what concerns me is if people cannot make a good living in their 50s, how can they save for retirement? That's one of the things I just don't understand, how people will do that. And that's because I spent a lot of time, as you know, working with people preparing financially for retirement. But when people lose jobs in their peak earning years, and I think that's going to become a social economic problem in our society later down the line.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Rosemary. I mean, if you cannot contribute to your retirement in the 50s, and of course, you have the 2 or 3% that they'll do fine. But for the majority of folks, if you can't contribute for that 10-year period of time in your 50s, it snowballs to it becomes a lifelong problem. It's not that it goes away when you're in your 60s. It doesn't go away when you're in your 70s. It truly becomes a lifelong problem.
And this is becoming a bigger problem because people are living longer. We talk about the longevity dividend and how wonderful it is that everybody's living longer. But to live longer means you have to have more money to support that longevity. So these are the things that concern me. And obviously you have your own concerns. But let's get to the question of the day, which is, why have organizations ignored the importance of the mature worker? There's a lot to say about that, I'm sure, but let's hear you.
Yeah. So let me start out with an example of what should be. So early in my career, I was fortunate enough to work for Starbucks Coffee. And if anybody knows the story around Starbucks Coffee, Howard Schultz was the CEO back then. And his ultimate dream and desire was to ensure that everybody was treated better than his father, who, when he got injured in the workplace, they fired him and they were not able to put food on the table for many years. And then his father passed away. And I remember sitting around the boardroom table and we were talking about challenges that we were having within the stores of hiring good qualified baristas. Baristas are the ones who make the coffee in the store. And one of the brave, smart executives around the table said, well, I've noticed in our Northwest region, we have a much older workforce that has come into work as a barista. And quite honestly, we're having lower turnover with them. And with a little bit of extra training and a little bit of extra patience, they are doing a phenomenal job for us. And I remember Howard Schultz giving one of these, which he's known for, which is basically that he's deep in thought. And he said, how could we make sure that we are the company that builds out our compensation and benefit plans to bring in the mature worker into our stores? And we literally spent months on that. And I could tell you today, because I worked there for 10 years, I'm a big Starbucks drinker and a big customer. I would say 30% of the people that I see within the store are in the 50+ age group. And the reason for that is they took the time to provide the appropriate type of training for the skills that were necessary. They offered part-time health insurance because they knew that their 50+ employees, which they call partners, were going to need that at their stage in their life. And they made their 401k retirement match available to their part-timers for the same reason that we just talked about your scenario, Rosemary. So that's what I would hope and what I would wish, and I would hope that I would see in every business. Now, to get to your question, unfortunately, that is not the case. I have worked in 7 different companies, and I would say that 5 of them live in the same stereotypical environment of the older worker. They're not going to be able to learn technology. They're not going to be as productive. They're going to cost us more on our medical benefits because they're going to need to see the doctor more. They're going to cost us more from a compensation perspective because they've got 20, 30, 40 years of working experiences. Those are the things that I still hear when I speak to HR professionals around the country and or my own experiences over the last 30 years. So it's all, in my opinion, it's all around what I believe are the stereotypes of how people think about the mature worker. They don't think like Howard Schultz and how Starbucks did 20 years ago. They think in a much more stereotypical way, which is usually more on the negative side than it is on the positive side.
One of the messages that we've tried to communicate, Stephen, through our Wisdom and Experience event, our Zoom events, our newsletters, everything, is that there is a bottom line benefit to employers of retaining, retraining mature workers because of the cost, first of all, of training the young people coming into the workforce. And it's general consensus that they don't stay very long with the employer. And they have training costs, and you spend the money on training them, then they're gone. Whereas the mature worker, you spend some money on upgrading their skills, and they're still there. I mean, is that cost benefit analysis seems to be missing in the leadership of a lot of companies. And the birth rate in this country, everybody by this time, I think, knows that our birth rate has declined. And so it's not like we're going to be producing a lot of new, younger workers. And the other thing is, a couple of years ago, we shared a study that was done in 2018 by the Florida Department of Labor and the Career Source of Palm Beach County on the skills gap. Thousands of companies were surveyed, and they almost to a man said the younger people coming in don't have basic skills, communication skills, technical. They might have some technical skills, but communication skills, they don't even show up on time. So I don't get it, Stephen. I just don't get it.
Well, I think everything is around the law of averages. You know, there are some organizations that do things really well. There are some young people who come into the workforce and they come in with the right set of interpersonal skills, technical skills, etc. But you got the law of averages, and you also have the flip side to that. And how much is what percentage is one thing versus the other. I think it really depends on industry. Industry makes a big difference. I could tell if you're talking about healthcare, where I've spent the last 17 years of my career, the way that you had described what you just said, Rosemary, is 100% true. In healthcare, the nurses and the physicians, those that have 20, 30, 40 years of experience are highly valued. And those who are coming in as a new RN, a new nurse, a new PA, a new NP, there's a lot of work that they have not learned within their programs to get them ready to be taking care of people, more so on the social side than on the technical side.
That's what they call soft skills gap. If you were trying to convince a company of the value of retaining, retraining mature workers, how would you convey the bottom line benefit to them? Because what it comes down to eventually is money.
Yeah.
And well, and maybe the long-term development of the company. How can that be conveyed to employers so that they get it? Or is there any possibility of doing that?
Well, it has to start at the top. You know, I talked about the Howard Schultz example. I have other examples where when I worked for Seattle Children's, I remember asking the CEO, why are you hiring me? I have no healthcare experience. Why would you hire me as your top HR person? And his answer was, because I don't want what a typical HR person is within healthcare. I want somebody who's diverse in their thinking. And in our conversations over time, I learned that what was valuable to him was to retain and continue to grow and develop. At that time, his 40-somethings, 50-somethings, and 60-somethings, because he understood that's where his bread and butter was going to be. He understood that that's where the patients who are coming in are going to benefit the greatest from. So first, my first response to your question, it has to start from the top. If your CEO or your executive team believes the old stereotypes that I talked about before of the mature worker, I don't know if you have much of a chance, Rosemary. But if you have somewhere within those levels, you have an agreement and an alignment that the mature worker provides great loyalty. They have much lower absenteeism than we get from our younger staff. They have learned interpersonal skills. They can teach, coach, and mentor younger people who come into the organization. If you have that, then you have a great opportunity to move things forward. But it really does start at the top, or if not the top, within the first couple of levels there.
So I learned that a long time ago, Stephen, if you want to make an impact, you have to have the support of the people on the top. They have to be responsive to the message. And maybe there needs to be better ways of working with them than we've seen to date. But I guess failing that, having it come from the top down, to what extent do you feel that HR professionals can push the message up? Are they being effective in doing that? And I know we have HR people on the call, people with that background experience like Karen. Can it go from below up?
So the answer is absolutely yes. I have this saying, which in the HR world, people know what I mean when I say this, that when I go into an organization, I always want to take the organization from a personnel department and turn it into a world-class human resource department. So if you have the right HR leader who isn't focused on the old way of HR, it's all about the paperwork, it's all about the benefits, it's all about the administration, and you have people who truly understand the value of human resources and they have a seat at the table, it's those people that can move this snowball up the hill. And I'm happy to say that 20 years ago, my peers, and I'll even put myself in that category just to be safe here, we were more in that personnel bucket. And over time, we got a bigger seat at the table, more seats at the table. And I believe today, if you ask CEOs, Fortune 500 CEOs, they're going to tell you today, especially after COVID, the number one partner on their team that they rely on is going to be their HR executive. You'll still have some who will say their CFO. You'll have a couple who will say their IT person. But the majority today are going to say their chief human resource officer. And that's good progress.
Okay, that's hopeful. Sometimes we wonder if, the focus on short-term profit and shareholder benefit has, poisoned the long-term view of human development in companies. And that sounds very promising. So yay to those HR people who are able to do that.
And to those CEOs who are progressive in their thinking.
Can we create a resource directory of those CEOs here in Palm Beach County for people who are looking for work?
That would be a great task.
Well, there you go. There's your retirement. Maybe somebody will pay you to do that.
You know what, Rosemary, you could probably ask the human resource people in confidence, and they could tell you who those CEOs are.
Well, Karen is very connected to the SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management people here in Palm Beach County. Well, she probably has a little bit of an insight, and but that would be really useful to know, wouldn't it? Any case, so moving on to one of the things that you wanted to share with us is what you've learned in working with and supporting employees 50 plus as an HR professional.
I really thought this was a great question, and I had to think of many different scenarios of people that I've worked with in the workplace and even people outside on the coaching side. I believe that those 50 plus, they have lost their voice in a lot of cases. And what do I mean by that? They've lost their voice because the organizations are changing so fast. They're changing roles, they're changing skills, they're changing all different requirements of their people resources. And what I find are those who are in their 50 plus, they struggle the most to figure out where do they fit in this new equation. And so what I always do is I encourage everybody, but there are others that I really have to take by the hand to be flexible, get comfortable dealing with the ambiguity, coach and share your expertise with everyone that will open their ears and listen. And that is how I try to help this group. And so, for example, in my last couple of jobs, we've had multiple reduction in forces. We've had lots of reorganizations, and you would have a lot of folks, again, in that 50 plus group that really don't understand how to move forward in that environment. What do you mean that my skills aren't needed in this role anymore? What does that mean for me? How am I going to learn more skills? What's going to happen with my pay? Who am I going to be working for? And it becomes a very big effect on that person within that work environment and their productivity. And so I've always instructed my HR teams that you need to go as best as you can, educate one-on-ones, help the people in the place where they need it most to move forward. And that's sort of what I've seen. And that's sort of how I have tried to help and resolve that challenge.
So leading from that, in the workplace experience that you had as an HR executive, how does that translate into how you can help individuals find 50 plus individuals find a job in this current environment? What are the things that you focus on with them, encourage them to do, to learn, or whatever it is, as coaching with individuals?
So I have two specific things that I work on. And depending on the individual, these are really, really hard. The first one is network, network, and network. And I can't tell you how many people I have coached either as an HR executive or as part of my coaching practice, where people say, I can't do that. I don't like that. I'm uncomfortable with that. That's not going to help me. And I give example after example after example that, and one of my CEOs made this comment before, and it was a sales business. And he said, if I'm sitting at home watching TV at night, my phone never rings. If I'm out networking, almost guaranteed my phone is ringing in the next week. And I've always taken that lesson to use on the coaching side for folks, and in this case, 50 plus, that are really challenged in finding new opportunities at this stage in their life. So whether you're going out to the local church or synagogue, whether you're going out to the local society of the area that you focus in, whether you're going out to a fundraiser, wherever you're going, network, network, and network. And so that's my first one. Not easy for a lot of people, but it's crucially important. My second one, which is a little bit easier for folks, but sometimes they have a tough time understanding the real value of it, is to go and take online certification classes. There's nothing more powerful to a recruiter when they're speaking with you to understand your current skill sets. And you say, over the last 6 months, while I've been out of work, I have signed up for a business acumen class. I have signed up for a leadership class. I have learned Microsoft Office, which I never understood before. When you can share that you're a constant learner and you're willing to continue to do that, that recruiter who might have been shaking their head up front, you now have their attention, because everybody is always looking for that lifelong learner, and you want to be out front and center as a lifelong learner. So those are the two most critical things that I talk about and I help people with on the coaching side when they're looking for new jobs.
Stephen, why do you think people have such a problem with networking? I mean, well, speaking for myself, I've always been an out and about person. You know, you
Yeah.
want to find me, I'm out and about. And the second thing is, although I've been a working person all my life, I still am for Encore. I've also been a volunteer alongside that. And one of the things that we have become aware of is that whole sense of community in our country has declined, and volunteerism has declined, particularly here in Florida. We've seen this research on that. And generally, people are less involved in community, whether it's going to the church or the synagogue or the chamber or whatever it is that people used to go to. They don't go to any longer. And I keep wondering, and nobody really seems to have an answer for this. Why are they not doing those things any longer? Is it because
Well,
they have too much work, too much family obligations? Or are they, well, at home on their devices, which is what a lot of people think is the case. They're you know, on the computer or watching television or whatever it is that people do, but it isn't connecting with people. And that is how you find out things. So what is
So-
it, Stephen, that makes them reluctant to network?
So I'll answer the first part of that question first, and that is, for a lot of people, it is extremely uncomfortable. So I'm gonna be vulnerable, and I'll use myself. So when I used to work for Harris Corporation early in my career, I was always strongly advised to go to the Brevard County. I don't think it was called SHRM at that time. It might have been the Personnel Association, but to go and network there on a monthly basis. Well, let me tell you, that was like pulling teeth. I hated it. And I would walk in the room and I'd see, I don't know, 18, 20, 22 other people. A lot of them already knew each other. And I just remember standing in the corner saying, oh my God, this is horrible. I hope somebody comes and talks to me. Now, over time, I got really good at it. But when I'm coaching people and I talk about networking, there is a big fear there of, who am I going to meet? What do I say? How do I say it? What if no one comes to talk to me? I'm not comfortable going to talk to others. And so there's a very big social component to that a lot of people, and when I say a lot, it's probably 50-50. So, you know, we've got our Rosemarys on one side that are just really good at it. And then we got this other 50% that fall in the category of me 30 years ago to even me today. If you tell me go network, and I do a lot of networking, it is never my favorite thing to do until I'm in the middle of it. And I'm like, oh, this is great. But getting in that car and going and walking in, that's a tough feat for me. So I understand there's both sides. So I really think that's part of the answer to your question, Rosemary.
So how do you help people overcome that if they need to make contacts?
It's constant role playing. So with two of my three folks that I'm doing today, we meet in person. One is virtual. But when we meet in person, I am a big, huge believer of role playing. And so I literally stand up. I say, come introduce yourself to me. Why aren't you looking me in the eyes? Why was that such a weak handshake? What is your elevator speech? Well, what is an elevator speech? Well, what are you going to say to me when you do meet me? Are you just going to say hi and be quiet? What is it that you want to say? How are you going to introduce yourself? And so role playing, role playing. And then when the person's confident enough, you find the right networking opportunity for them to go to their first networking event. And you try to build confidence one step at a time. So that's how I do it. Now, I will tell you, virtually, it's more difficult. I try to do some of those things virtually, and it's not as easy.
Okay. Well, confidence, I think, is a real problem for a lot of people. And maybe rather than focusing on how they present themselves to others, although they do need an introductory thing, maybe if they focus more on being curious about the other people, it
Yes.
might be helpful.
Yes.
You know, who are you? What can I do for you? What do we have in common? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you have your hands full. The last question that I want to talk about Stephen, and then maybe we can open up for questions from the other folks. What are the real challenges you see for the 50+ employees, those still working and those trying to get it back into the workforce at decent jobs, at decent pay? What are the challenges you see for them today?
Well, for those that are still in the workforce, do everything you can to be present, to share your knowledge and your experiences, even when you're not asked, to show that you're willing to be flexible with whatever it is that the organization is striving for. Be confident and show that you're able to deal with a certain amount of ambiguity. And always ask, how can I help? And what can I do more of? To me, if you're doing those types of things while you're in the workforce, and if there is going to be a reduction in force or some major reorganization, even those CEOs or HR leaders that may not be fully progressive, they're going to always remember those who are always asking, how can I help? What can I do more of? How can I assist you? So that would be my greatest guidance and coaching to those in the workforce. For those out of the workforce, I find that to be even more difficult today. There are certain sectors, travel, tourism, healthcare, insurance, where I would say jobs are aplenty. If you have an interest in those industries and you have skill sets that can add value to any of those industries, I would be looking there. The investment of your time, just like I had already said, get out there, network, meet people, introduce yourself, make sure you have an updated, clean resume that's not 6 pages long. That's another thing that I give advice on. A lot of times the 50+ employee has a 4, 5, 6 page resume. Nobody wants to look at that. And so I always provide them coaching and guidance. How can we get this to 2 pages? How can we focus it on the 3 to 5 bullets in each job that are going to be most valuable to this employer that you're applying to? Reach out for help. Those would be my coaching recommendations at this time.
Would you agree, Stephen, that there seems to be a lot of turmoil in the labor market these days? I mean, on the one hand, people are saying they can't find employees. Other people are saying they can't find jobs. The official position of the government is that we're at full employment, and yet we know all these people who don't have jobs and want to have jobs.
Yeah.
And a low unemployment rate doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just means that there are people who are perhaps filing for unemployment compensation, but a lot of people who have given up looking. So I wouldn't blame people for being confused as to, what's going on.
Without a doubt. And no one's paying attention to the underemployed. And that to me is a big area of frustration for many. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in the 50+ group that fall into that category, which is really difficult. It is very confusing. I turn on the news all the time, and I'm a financial guy, even though I'm an HR guy. A lot of us HR people are becoming much stronger on the financial side, but I can't help but put on the news and hear about how the government is trying to push us into more job losses to offset inflation. And I just sit there and I scratch my head. And then I speak with people who are like, what's wrong with me? The unemployment rate is like 3.5%. Why can't I find a job? And it's always the education of that's just a number. There's so many variables that go into that number. There's so many other variables that aren't even considered. And education, and try to help people through that turmoil. But watching the news, watching financials, reading the newspaper, that is not going to help people understand what's really going on within the economy today.
Thank you, Stephen. Christine, do we have any questions in the chat? And then we'll open it up for in-person questions.
No questions yet, but we do actually, Mark actually did a comment, and I'm trying to pull that up there. And he was talking about other ways to help people get comfortable with networking, and he suggested take an improv class. He found that can make his most introverted clients come out of their shell.
Okay.
It's a great example. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
And
All right,
Eduardo
folks.
has his hand up. Eduardo.
Okay, Eduardo.
Good afternoon. Steven, thank you so much. You were fantastic. You have such a relaxed way of expressing yourself. I love that.
Thank you.
You're going to be a great consultant.
Thank you.
I am in my mid-70s chronologically. Mentally, physically, I feel like a 50-year-old person. I go running most every day, about 4 miles, 4.5 miles. But recently, there is such a need in our school district. I'm talking about now Broward County. I applied to work as a teacher assistant. I am a veteran of U.S. Air Force, honorably discharged. I have a master's degree. I have an incredible background in business. I've studied 10 different startups, and I am retired. I'm still a partner in a chain of health food stores. But I had only, I couldn't get an interview. And not only that, but just to go through the actual employment application was horrendous, at least with the school district. No one called me. Finally, I had to call someone else. I had to write a letter to the superintendent of schools to see if anybody could help me with my application. Number one, they wanted a reference on myself. I've always been on my own. So how can I write? I finally wrote a reference on me. Eduardo is an incredible person. He's the best thing. Please hire. I didn't know what to do, but it took almost 3 weeks for me to finally able to send in that application for employment. To make a long story short, I had a great interview at an elementary. I'll take it back. It was a middle school. And they said, Ed, thank you. We love you, but we need to wait for the school principal to arrive. She's on vacation. We'll call you next week. I waited a week, I waited 2 weeks, I gave them a call. Ed, I'm sorry, let me get back to you. 2 months later, I'm still awaiting a phone call. So there is such a need for good individuals. And of course, I've been with junior achievement forever. You know, I love to volunteer, mostly our youngsters. And I work with this school here near Pembroke Pines called Everglades High School. And I share my knowledge they have this incredible entrepreneurship class. And I share my knowledge with the students. And but again, no one wants to take advantage of my abilities, my background, my education, nothing. Just it's heartbreaking sometimes.
It, it is heartbreaking. Thank you for sharing that. And also thank you for your service. You know, you did all the right things. So what I would basically coach someone is, if you're having trouble with an application, if you're having trouble getting somebody to call you back, utilize other tools, whether they're LinkedIn or other tools. Try to find other people. In this case, it was the superintendent. Very easy to find out who the superintendent is of the school district. Reach out to that person. Get them to communicate with you. You did that. That was fantastic. You got to the next step. You got help with your application. You had your interview, and then it fell apart. The only other guidance I would have given you in that case is, just like you did with the superintendent, I would have done, and maybe you did, I would have done the same thing with the school principal. That, you know, here's the process I went through. The superintendent was very helpful. Your staff was great during the interviewing process and helping me. And I haven't heard anything for 2 to 3 weeks now. Can you please follow up with a phone call? I'd like to speak with you. Did you try that, Eduardo?
I have not, but great suggestion. I felt I didn't want to go over the assistant principal's head, as that was the person that I spoke to. And, you know, I felt a bit awkward going above his head to his boss, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
You know, you might want to couch that in a, you know, I'm reaching out to you. I want to ensure that, let's say the person's name is Joe. Just want to make sure that Joe is okay and that he's still employed within the district. I've been awaiting a phone call back for the last month. Is there anything that you could help me with in this process? That way it doesn't seem like you're, you know, formally going above head at that point.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're
I know
very
that Mark
welcome.
has his hand up as well.
Yes, Mark?
Yeah. Schools are strange beasts. They will not hire you unless they know you.
I've noticed that.
So number one is walk into the school and meet the principal secretary.
Mhm.
2, you may consider student teaching, not student teaching, but substitute teaching.
Interesting.
There's a huge shortage of substitute teachers. Once they know you and you walk in, you smile, you're not this horrible beast, they will talk to you. Until then, when it's all going through the paper mill, and schools are hugely inefficient. After I had a near fatal bicycle accident 20 years ago, I took 2 years off in my career and taught high school math. And I used all my networking skills. I walked in, I would hand my resume to this principal secretary. I would email it in and I would fax it in. I got hired 2 weeks before school started, when they absolutely had to hire somebody. And I went through an alternative certification, and they already contacted a 25-year-old in my certification class, and she immediately called me and said, Mark, there's a job open at Aikens. And I immediately did all of that.
Really
Okay.
good advice.
Great suggestions. Thank you, Mark.
Well, Steve, I'm sure there's no lack of people who need help from people like you. Are there any other questions, Christine? Anybody with their hand up who needs?
I'm not seeing any, but
Come
if
on,
someone.
Karen, step up here. You must have either a comment or a question or something.
I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm really learning today, and it's just fascinating, to hear. And I appreciate Stephen very much, and Eduardo and Mark for sharing, and other folks who kind of are thinking of their own situation and, how do they feel about networking or doing these kinds of things. I'll just share, I heard something on an NPR radio show the other day, and this gentleman was talking about he had gone to his therapist about this certain situation, and the therapist said, well, what you have to remember is there's two things. Is something difficult or is it dangerous? And if it's difficult, you can work through it. And so this particular person says, once I realized, in this case, networking, if you have a fear of networking, what's the worst thing that could happen? You can't think of something to say, or they say hi and move on to somebody else, and then you got to approach. They kind of helped. This gentleman said it helped him see the difference of difficult versus dangerous. And I kind of like that, because
Good point.
okay, what's the worst that could happen? You can't think of something to say. You don't have anything in common. You move on to the next person. So I appreciate all the encouragement about networking, because it certainly is something that I'm sure a lot of people struggle with. It doesn't perhaps come naturally to everybody. So thank you, everybody, for sharing.
Yeah.
Is there some encouragement, though, from a trend line standpoint, around the stereotype that we all understand, that's been in place? It seems like that the stereotype isn't changing, right? With all this knowledge and awareness of the benefit of mature workers. So what stops that from having an improving trend line?
David, I think that's a great question, and I think it's very industry specific. I would go out on a limb and say, in general, it has not improved that much in the technology and the banking side. It has changed significantly on the healthcare side. I've seen some positive changes on the retail side, and certainly on the hospitality side. And I do believe that there are some really good positive trends in certain industries.
Do you see any industries beyond the ones you just mentioned, Stephen? Are there others?
I mean, I really feel that the retail, the healthcare, the hospitality, and in some cases, surprisingly, on the insurance side, I've seen some positive trends moving forward. Banking and technology and manufacturing, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of great HR people within a lot of organizations.
I see we have one more question. Judith?
Yeah, I have a quick question. You briefly hit upon part-time workers. Now, I'm also of an advanced stage, and I would like to work part-time. What do you see as the future for part-time workers? We don't need benefits, although I would love to get dental, but we're on Medicare, and it's almost at the point now where I call myself a paper pusher. I just want a job that keeps me busy, adds a bit to my to my Social Security, and gets me out of the house. What are your thoughts on that?
How are you with technology and using something like a site like Indeed?
I've been using Indeed for months and months and months, and also
Okay.
Rosemary's site.
Okay, and I ask that only because I know for part-time jobs, Indeed typically has hundreds of them within all different regions. What I don't know is how quick the employees are to respond and what they're looking for and things like that. And then, of course, there's the Encore site. I took a look at that before coming on, and it's nice to see that there are organizations on there that are age friendly, not only for part-time work, but for full-time work also.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Stephen, for that endorsement.
Of course.
Because what we're trying to tell people is that there are employers in Palm Beach County who would welcome the mature worker if they're having frustrations with Indeed. I was in the pool for my usual swim this morning, and a woman told me that she actually did find a job through Indeed, and it was a part-time job, and it was with the school district in Palm Beach County. So it can happen, but you have to remember that for every job that Indeed posts on their website, there are 1 million people looking at it besides you. And that is why we are suggesting that people pay attention to those employers in Palm Beach County who would welcome a mature worker. And that's why we put their job boards on our website. And every time somebody gets in touch with me and says they're looking for a job, and I say, well, have you been on our website? Did you go to the page with all the employers that are looking for to fill jobs? Well, no. Well, why didn't you? I mean, sometimes I will, everybody who knows me knows I can get a little impatient with the lack of initiative that some people display who are looking for work. Looking for work is work. Always
It's a
has been.
full-time job.
It is a
Full-time job.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Stephen, it has been really a pleasure to hear from you today. You wondered if there would be enough to keep us busy for an hour.
I know. Great questions and great discussion. So
Well, you have a
I
lot to
appreciate-
share with people, and I can assure you that we'll be back in touch with you how you can work with Encore going
Alrighty,
forward and how we can help you.
all right. I would love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Okay.
Stephen.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
everybody.
Great
Thank you.
information. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great Wednesday.